There's a strange feeling you can't quite explain, like something is shifting beneath the surface of your life. Not loud, not obvious, but undeniable. It shows up in quiet moments, in the way certain conversations don't feel the same anymore, in the way you've started pulling back, thinking more, feeling deeper. And maybe you've asked yourself, why do I feel like I'm changing, even when nothing around me has? What if this isn't random? What if this is preparation? Because sometimes, before someone truly meaningful enters your life, you're guided into becoming someone new first. Not perfect, not finished, but aware. You start noticing things you once ignored. The way you used to tolerate certain behaviors, but now you pause. The way you used to chase validation, but now you question it. The way silence used to feel uncomfortable, but now it feels necessary. It's not that you've become distant. It's that you've become honest. Honest about your energy. Honest about your time. Honest about what you can no longer pretend to accept. And that honesty, it changes everything. Because growth doesn't always feel like progress. Sometimes it feels like loss. You outgrow conversations that once excited you. You detach from environments that once felt like home. You even question parts of yourself you used to defend. And in those moments, it's easy to think something is wrong. But this is what real transformation looks like. Quiet, uncomfortable, deep. You're not becoming someone else. You're remembering who you are without the noise. And when that begins to happen, something else starts to shift. You stop looking for people to complete you. Instead, you start becoming whole on your own. You become more grounded, more aware, more intentional with who and what you allow into your space. And that changes the kind of connections you attract. Because meaningful connections don't come from need. They come from alignment, from mutual understanding, from emotional depth, from two individuals who have both done the inner work in their own way. That's why this phase of your life feels different. It's not just about meeting someone. It's about becoming the version of yourself who can recognize something real and not overlook it. Because in the past, maybe you did. Maybe you were drawn to what was familiar, not what was healthy. Maybe you stayed in situations that felt right in the moment, but wrong in the long run. But now, you notice patterns. You sense intentions. You trust your instincts more than your impulses. That's growth. And growth changes timing. It slows you down. Not to delay you, but to prepare you. So when you do meet someone who brings calm instead of confusion, clarity instead of chaos, you don't question it. You recognize it. Not because it's perfect, but because it feels different in a way you can't ignore. There's no need to force it. No need to chase it. No need to prove anything. It just flows naturally, steadily. And more importantly, you don't lose yourself trying to hold on to it. Because now, you understand something you didn't before. The right connection doesn't require you to shrink. It doesn't demand that you abandon your growth. It doesn't pull you away from yourself. It meets you where you are and grows with you. But here's the truth most people overlook. Before you experience that kind of connection with someone else, you have to build it within yourself. You have to learn how to sit with your thoughts without running from them. You have to face your patterns without blaming everything around you. You have to grow not for someone else, but for your own clarity. Because when you do that, you stop settling. You stop chasing. You stop confusing intensity with meaning. And that's when everything begins to shift. Not suddenly, not magically, but meaningfully. So if you've been feeling different lately, if you've been pulling away from what no longer feels right, if you've been questioning things you once accepted without thought, don't ignore it. Don't rush it. This phase matters. You're not falling behind. You're aligning. And maybe, just maybe, you're becoming ready to recognize someone who reflects the growth you've been working through all along. Not someone to save you, not someone to fix you, but someone who sees you clearly, because you finally see yourself. So take your time. Keep growing. Keep becoming more aware of who you are and who you're not. Because the most meaningful connections don't appear when you're searching desperately. They appear when you're finally grounded enough to receive something real. And when that moment comes, you won't need a sign. You'll feel the difference. If this message spoke to something inside you, take a moment and reflect on where you are in your journey right now. And if you're committed to growing, to becoming more aware, to building something real within yourself, then stay connected to this space. Because this isn't just about meeting someone special. It's about becoming someone who recognizes what truly matters when it finally appears. Subscribe to Return to Awakening and be part of a journey that's not about escaping life, but understanding it more deeply than ever before. And the deeper you go into this phase, the more you begin to realize something unexpected. It was never just about another person entering your life. It was about the space you're creating within yourself. Because before, your life may have been full of noise, full of distractions, full of voices that weren't even your own. And now, there's space to think, space to question, space to finally hear yourself clearly. At first, that space can feel uncomfortable, almost like something is missing. But what's actually happening is something is being removed. The unnecessary weight, the constant need for approval, the patterns that kept you stuck in cycles you couldn't explain. And as that weight fades, you become lighter, not careless, but free in a way that feels unfamiliar. You start choosing peace over attention, clarity over confusion, depth over surface-level connections. And that shift, it's quiet but powerful. Because now, when you meet people, you don't just listen to their words. You feel their energy. You notice the way they carry themselves, the way they respond under pressure, the way they treat others when there's nothing to gain. You're not judging. You're understanding. And that understanding creates a new standard within you. A standard that doesn't come from ego, but from experience. From everything you've had to walk away from, even when it wasn't easy. Because walking away, that's something you've learned the hard way. You've learned that not everything is meant to be held onto. Not every connection is meant to last. And not every feeling is meant to be followed. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is let go. Even when part of you wants to stay. Even when it feels familiar. Even when it feels comfortable. Because deep down, you've started to recognize the difference between comfort and alignment. Comfort keeps you where you are. Alignment moves you toward who you're becoming. And right now, you're choosing growth. Even if it means standing alone for a while. Even if it means facing parts of yourself you once avoided. Even if it means stepping into uncertainty without clear answers. Because something inside you knows. This is necessary. This is part of the process. And slowly, without even realizing it, you're becoming more intentional, more selective, more aware of what truly deserves your time, your energy, your presence. You're no longer trying to fit into spaces that don't reflect who you are. You're no longer shrinking to make others comfortable. You're no longer ignoring your intuition just to avoid being alone. And that changes everything. Because now, when someone enters your life, you won't be looking to be completed. You won't be looking to escape yourself. You won't be looking for someone to fill a void. You'll be observing, feeling, understanding, and most importantly, you'll be able to recognize the difference between someone who adds to your life and someone who distracts you from your growth. That awareness, it protects you, not by building walls, but by giving you clarity. And clarity is something you didn't always have. There was a time when you second-guessed yourself, when you ignored red flags, when you convinced yourself that certain situations would change if you just waited long enough. But now, you trust what you feel, not impulsively, but deeply, because you've taken the time to understand yourself, your patterns, your triggers, your strengths, your limits, and that self-understanding, it's rare. It's what transforms the way you connect with others. Because when you know yourself, you don't lose yourself. Not in conversations, not in relationships, not in moments that once would have pulled you away from your center. You stay grounded, present, aware, and that presence, it draws in a different kind of energy. Not rushed, not forced, but steady, intentional, real. And that's the kind of connection that doesn't confuse you. It doesn't leave you questioning your worth. It doesn't create chaos in your mind. Instead, it feels like clarity, like ease, like something that doesn't need to be chased because it naturally meets you where you are. But none of that happens by accident. It happens because of everything you're going through right now. The silence, the reflection, the moments where you chose growth, even when it was uncomfortable. All of it, it's shaping you into someone who can experience something deeper without losing yourself in the process. And what's even more powerful is that you're starting to become comfortable with not knowing everything. There was a time when uncertainty made you anxious, when you needed answers immediately, when you tried to control outcomes, when you held on too tightly just to feel secure. But now, you're learning to trust the process of your own growth. Not blindly, but with awareness. You understand that not everything is meant to be figured out in a single moment. Some things unfold slowly. Some realizations take time to settle. Some connections reveal their depth only when you're patient enough to experience them fully. And that patience, it's something you've earned. Through moments where rushing only led to confusion. Through situations where forcing things only pushed them further away. Through experiences that taught you timing matters more than urgency. So now, you observe more than you react. You listen more than you assume. You give things space to reveal themselves, instead of trying to define them too quickly. And that shift creates a different kind of peace within you. A grounded stillness. Not because everything is perfect, but because you're no longer at war with uncertainty. You're learning to move with it instead of against it. And in that space, you begin to notice something subtle but important. You're no longer drawn to what's loud. You're no longer impressed by what looks good on the surface. You're no longer chasing intensity just because it feels exciting in the moment. Instead, you're drawn to what feels real, to what feels calm but meaningful, simple but genuine, quiet but strong. And that kind of awareness, it changes what you allow into your life. Because now you're not just asking, does this feel good right now? You're asking, does this align with who I'm becoming? That question alone, it protects your energy in ways you never thought about before. It stops you from repeating old patterns. It stops you from settling for less than what you've worked so hard to understand. It keeps you anchored in your growth, even when something tempting tries to pull you back. Because growth isn't always about moving forward. Sometimes, it's about not going back, not returning to habits that once felt normal, not reopening doors that you've already, not convincing yourself that something is right when deep down you know it is. And that level of self-honesty, it requires strength, real strength, the kind that doesn't always look powerful on the outside, but feels unshakable on the inside. And as you continue to move through this phase, you may notice something else. Your circle becomes smaller, not because people disappear, but because your tolerance for misalignment becomes clearer. You value depth over quantity, meaning over attention, peace over constant stimulation. And while that might feel isolating at times, it's actually refining your environment. It's making room. Room for conversations that matter. Room for connections that feel genuine. Room for someone who doesn't just pass through your life, but understands it. Because the truth is, when you're constantly surrounded by noise, you can't hear what truly resonates with you. But now, you've created space. And in that space, you're becoming more aware of what truly connects with you on a deeper level. Not based on appearance, not based on temporary emotions, but based on something more grounded, something that feels stable, consistent, real. And when you reach that level of awareness, you don't just meet people, you recognize them, not because they're perfect, but because something about the connection feels aligned with the person you've become. It feels natural, not forced. It feels steady, not confusing. It feels mutual, not one-sided. And that's something you couldn't fully appreciate before. Because before, you were still discovering yourself, still learning your boundaries, still understanding your own value. But now, you're different, more aware, more grounded, more in tune with what truly matters to you. And that difference, it changes everything about how you connect. Because you're no longer approaching people from a place of lack. You're approaching from a place of understanding. And that understanding, it allows you to experience connection without losing clarity, without losing balance, without losing yourself in the process. And that's where something truly meaningful begins to take shape. Not rushed, not forced, but built on a foundation that actually lasts. Because it's not based on who you used to be. It's aligned with who you are becoming. And as you continue stepping into that version of yourself, you begin to notice how differently you handle moments that once overwhelmed you. Situations that used to trigger you now make you pause. Reactions that used to be instant now become thoughtful. Emotions that once controlled you now pass through you without taking over. Not because you've become cold, but because you've become aware. Aware of what deserves your energy and what doesn't. Aware of what's worth holding onto and what needs to be released. Aware that not every situation requires your response. And that awareness, it gives you control in a way you never had before. Not control over others, but control over yourself. Your thoughts, your reactions, your direction. And that kind of control, it creates stability. A stability that doesn't depend on external validation. A stability that doesn't collapse when things don't go your way. A stability that stays, even when everything around you feels uncertain. And from that stability, you begin to radiate something different, not something you try to show, not something you force others to notice, but something that naturally comes from being aligned within yourself. It's a quiet confidence, the kind that doesn't need to prove anything, the kind that doesn't seek attention, the kind that simply exists because you've done the inner work. And people feel that, even if they can't explain it, even if they don't fully understand it. They feel the difference in how you speak, in how you listen, in how you carry yourself, because you're no longer moving from insecurity. You're moving from clarity, and clarity changes the energy you bring into every interaction. You're not trying to impress. You're not trying to be someone you're not. You're not trying to force connections to happen. You're simply present, real, authentic, and that authenticity, it becomes a filter. It naturally attracts what aligns with you and gently pushes away what doesn't. Without conflict, without force, without confusion. Because now, you don't need to chase what's meant to stay, and you don't need to hold onto what's meant to leave. You trust the flow of your own journey more than ever before. Not because you have all the answers, but because you've seen what happens when you ignore your inner voice. You've experienced the cost of going against yourself, and you felt the difference when you finally started listening. So now, you move differently, with intention, with awareness, with a deeper sense of self-respect. And that self-respect, it sets the tone for every connection in your life. It teaches others how to treat you without you needing to say much. It establishes boundaries without creating distance. It creates space for something genuine to grow without forcing it into existence. And in that space, something important begins to happen. You stop fearing being misunderstood. You stop needing everyone to see you the same way. You stop adjusting yourself just to fit into expectations that were never meant for you. Because you've accepted something deeper. Not everyone is meant to understand you. And that's okay. Because the right people won't need an explanation. They'll recognize your depth without you having to simplify it. They'll appreciate your growth without feeling threatened by it. They'll meet your energy without trying to change it. And that kind of connection, it doesn't feel draining. It feels natural, balanced, grounded, and most importantly, it feels safe to be yourself. No masks, no pretending, no pressure to be anything other than who you are. And that's when you realize something that changes everything. You were never too much. You were just in the wrong spaces, surrounded by people who couldn't meet you where you were growing. But now, you're no longer shrinking. You're no longer questioning your worth. You're no longer waiting for permission to be who you are becoming. You're standing in it, fully, quietly, confidently. And that energy, it's rare, because it doesn't come from external success. It comes from internal alignment, from choosing growth over comfort, from choosing truth over illusion, from choosing yourself even when it wasn't easy. And as you continue on this path, you'll start to notice how naturally things begin to fall into place. Not perfectly, not instantly, but meaningfully, with a sense of direction that feels real, with connections that feel intentional, with moments that feel aligned with the journey you've been walking all along. And in those moments, you'll understand why everything had to unfold the way it did, why the delays mattered, why the distance was necessary, Why the growth couldn't be rushed? Because it wasn't just preparing you for someone else. It was preparing you for yourself. And once you begin to fully step into that understanding, something inside you settles. Not in a way that makes life predictable, but in a way that makes you steady, no matter what unfolds. You stop looking at your journey as something that needs to be rushed. You stop measuring your life against timelines that were never truly yours. You stop questioning your path just because it looks different from others. Because now, you see the value in your pace, the depth in your experiences, the quiet strength you've built through moments no one else even noticed. And that changes how you see everything. You begin to appreciate the pauses, the in-between moments, the chapters where nothing seems to be happening, but everything is shifting internally. Because you've lived through enough to know. The most important changes don't always happen on the surface. They happen within you, in the way you think, in the way you respond, in the way you choose what stays and what no longer belongs. And with that awareness, you no longer fear being alone with your thoughts. You welcome it, because that's where clarity lives. That's where you reconnect with yourself. That's where you realign when life tries to pull you in too many directions. And the more you return to that space, the more grounded you become. Not easily shaken, not easily influenced, not easily distracted by things that don't align with your growth. And that grounded energy, it becomes your foundation, the place you operate from, the place you return to, no matter what's happening around you. And from that place, you start to experience life differently. You're not reacting to everything. You're choosing what truly matters. You're not absorbing every emotion around you. You're understanding what belongs to you and what doesn't. You're not getting lost in every connection. You're staying rooted in yourself while still being open. And that balance, it's something you didn't have before. Because before, it was easy to lose yourself in moments, in people, in expectations. But now, you've learned how to stay present without disappearing, how to care without overextending, how to connect without losing your sense of self. And that changes the entire experience of meeting someone new. Because now, it's not about impressing them. It's not about becoming who you think they want. It's not about proving your worth. It's about being fully yourself and allowing them to meet you there. No filters, no pressure, no performance, just presence. And when you approach connection from that place, you give it the space to become something real, something that isn't built on assumptions, something that isn't rushed into meaning, something that unfolds naturally at its own pace. And that's where depth begins. Not in intensity, not in speed, but in consistency, in mutual understanding, in the quiet moments where nothing needs to be said, but everything feels understood. And those moments, they're different. They don't create confusion. They don't leave you questioning everything. They don't make you feel like you have to chase clarity. They feel stable, grounded, clear in a way that doesn't overwhelm you. And that clarity, it allows you to relax into the connection, to experience it without overthinking every detail, to let it grow without forcing it into something it's not. And most importantly, to stay connected to yourself while connecting with someone else. Because that's the difference now. You're no longer losing yourself in the process. You're bringing your whole self into it. And that changes the outcome in ways you can't always predict. But you can feel a sense of ease, a sense of balance, a sense of knowing that whatever unfolds, You'll remain grounded within yourself. And that's what makes this phase so important, because it's not just about what's coming next. It's about who you are when it arrives. Calm, aware, aligned, ready not in a perfect way, but in a real one, and in that readiness, you begin to notice how much quieter your mind has become. Not empty, but clear. The constant overthinking starts to fade. The need to analyze every little detail begins to loosen. The pressure to figure everything out all at once slowly disappears. Because now, you trust yourself in a way you didn't before. You trust your ability to handle what comes. You trust your instincts when something feels right or wrong. You trust that even if something doesn't work out, you won't lose yourself in the process. And that trust, it changes the way you experience connection at the deepest level. Because fear used to lead. Fear of being hurt. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of things not lasting. But now, awareness leads. You're not ignoring red flags. You're not rushing into attachments. You're not building expectations before something has had time to naturally unfold. You're present. And presence, it allows you to see things as they are. Not as you hope they'll be. Not as you fear they might become. But as they truly exist in the moment. And that clarity, it removes the illusion. It removes the confusion. It removes the emotional chaos that once came from trying to force meaning too quickly. Because now, you let things reveal themselves. You give space for truth to surface. You allow consistency to speak louder than words. And that patience, it becomes your strength. Because most people rush. Most people chase feelings instead of understanding them. Most people build connections on intensity rather than stability. But you've stepped out of that pattern. You've seen where it leads. And you've chosen something different. Something deeper. Something real. And that choice, it sets the tone for everything that enters your life now. Because you're no longer available for what drains you. You're no longer attracted to what confuses you. You're no longer willing to ignore what doesn't align with your growth. And that's not because you've become closed off. It's because you've become clear. Clear about your worth. Clear about your boundaries. Clear about the kind of energy you want to share your life with. And that clarity, it acts like a quiet signal. It guides the right kind of connection toward you without you having to chase it. Not instantly, not perfectly, but naturally. Because when you're aligned within yourself, you don't need to force alignment with someone else. You recognize it. You feel it. You understand it without needing constant reassurance. And that understanding, it brings a sense of calm you may have never experienced before. No overthinking. No second guessing. No emotional highs followed by confusion. Just a steady, grounded connection that grows over time. And that kind of growth, it's different. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It doesn't demand attention. But it lasts because it's built on something real. Something that isn't shaken by small misunderstandings. Something that doesn't collapse under pressure. Something that evolves instead of fading. And that's what makes it meaningful. Because you've experienced the opposite before. Connections that felt intense but unstable. Moments that felt exciting but unclear. Situations that pulled you in but never truly grounded you. And now, you can see the difference. You can feel the difference. You can choose differently. And that ability to choose, it's one of the most powerful things you've developed. because it means you're no longer reacting to life. You're responding to it with awareness, with intention, with a deeper understanding of what truly aligns with who you are becoming. And as you continue to move forward with that awareness, you'll notice something else begin to shift. You're no longer waiting for the right moment. You're creating the right mindset. You're not depending on external timing. You're building internal readiness. And that readiness, it's what allows something meaningful to enter your life and actually stay. Because now, you're not just ready to meet someone. You're ready to experience connection in a way that's healthy, grounded, and real, without losing yourself, without rushing the process, without repeating the patterns you've worked so hard to break. And that's where everything begins to feel different. Not because life suddenly becomes perfect, but because you've become present enough to experience it in a deeper, more meaningful way. And the more present you become, the more you start to notice the small things you used to overlook. The way someone listens, not just hears you. The way they respond, not just react. The way their actions match their words, without needing to be questioned. Before, those things might have seemed ordinary. Now they stand out. Because you've learned that real connection isn't built on big moments alone. It's built in the quiet consistency most people ignore. In the effort that doesn't need to be announced. In the respect that shows up without being asked for. In the understanding that grows without pressure. And as you begin to value those things more, your perspective shifts even deeper. You stop chasing what looks impressive. You start appreciating what feels genuine. Because you've realized something important. Not everything that shines is meant to last. And not everything that's quiet is lacking. Some of the most meaningful connections, they don't arrive with intensity. They arrive with calm. A calm that doesn't confuse you. A calm that doesn't make you question where you stand. A calm that feels steady, even in uncertain moments. And at first, that kind of calm can feel unfamiliar. Maybe even a little strange. Because you've been used to emotional highs and lows. Used to unpredictability. Used to trying to figure things out as you go. But now, you're stepping into something different. Something that doesn't require constant emotional effort to maintain. Something that doesn't drain you just to keep it alive. Something that allows you to breathe, to be present, to simply exist within it. And that shift, it changes how you respond. You don't overanalyze every message. You don't create stories in your mind about what might happen. You don't rush to define something before it has time to naturally grow. You allow it. You experience it. You stay grounded in yourself while letting the connection unfold. And that grounded presence, it creates a different kind of bond. One that isn't based on need. One that isn't built on fear of losing it. But one that grows from mutual understanding and shared awareness. Because now, you're not trying to hold onto something out of fear. You're choosing to experience it from a place of clarity. And that clarity allows you to see things as they truly are. Not through the lens of past wounds. Not through the fear of repeating old patterns. But through a grounded sense of awareness that you've worked hard to build. And because of that, you're able to appreciate the connection without attaching your identity to it. You're able to care without losing your balance. You're able to be open without becoming vulnerable in a way that leaves you unprotected. It's a different kind of openness. One that comes with boundaries. One that comes with self-respect. One that allows connection to exist without consuming you. And that's something you didn't always have. There were times when you gave too much, too quickly. Times when you ignored your own needs, just to keep something going. Times when you confused emotional intensity with genuine depth. But now, you've learned the difference. And that learning, it shapes every decision you make moving forward. You don't just feel, you understand. You don't just react, you observe. You don't just hope, you align. And that alignment, it brings a sense of peace that doesn't depend on outcomes. Because you know, no matter what happens, you're not going to abandon yourself. You're not going to ignore your inner voice. You're not going to lose the clarity you've built just to hold onto something uncertain. And that self-trust, it's what allows you to truly experience something meaningful. Because you're no longer approaching connection from fear. You're approaching it from wholeness, from a place where you already feel complete within yourself. And from that place, anything that enters your life isn't there to fill a void. It's there to add to something that already exists. Something stable, something grounded, something real. And that's why this moment in your life matters so much. Because it's not just about who you're going to meet. It's about who you've become before they arrive. It's about the awareness you've built, the strength you've developed, the clarity you've earned through every experience that shaped you. All of it leading you to a place where you can finally experience connection. Without confusion, without chaos, without losing yourself along the way.